Got it. There's something about that recording in progress that always makes me like startled. Welcome everybody, and thank you for showing up on such short notice. And as the night starts, I'm sort of blown away by the number of people that came at such short notice, but the influence that a lot of people that are here have already had in this community. I'm seeing some very impressive names, and I'm going to geek out for a little second. Okay, I'm back. So welcome. So you are here. We are here to talk curriculum, which is our very most next important phase in all the work that has been done so far. And I have been tasked happily with hosting this with Karen Bates. And Karen, if you don't mind, if you would just give us a little synopsis of what you've been up to and how we got here.
So it's completely a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you again to everybody who turned out. I'm a sort of, I have a hard time even knowing quite how to introduce myself because I've worn a lot of hats in the K-12 space. I've
That's
been
why I made you do it.
Hmm?
Why I made you do it.
Yeah, right. I've been everything from I've done my time working for a combination of not-for-profits and for-profits in the literacy space and in K-12 generally. And in the last handful of years, I've chosen to kind of go out on my own and focus on advocacy and focus on supporting effectively fanning the flames of this science of reading movement in a number of different ways. But I have also occupied a space where I have the privilege of having seen most of the high quality, virtually all of the high quality curricula in a lot of different contexts. So with some degree of pride, I have the privilege of, again, knowing the high quality curriculum space better than most, and also trying to keep abreast of what is maybe the fastest changing space in all of K-12 education.
So we really are lucky to have you and all of your experience and all that you have learned and know. From where you sit, how do you see the biggest trends from 2023 in this particular space when we're looking at and talking about curriculum?
So anybody who knows me knows that I'm, a slide addict, and I can talk all day and riff all day, but I also, like, you press the button, I can talk all day. So slides help me keep myself kind of honest and on task. So I'm going to just, oh shoot. I also am like woefully terrible at technology. So let me just share my screen before.
Slides are our friends
I have
and
to do the
technology
thing.
hates us. So it's this weird dichotomy that we all live in.
I know. So I just spent a little bit of time compiling the top journalism of 2023, and I had to stop myself and like press pause on writing after I hit 28 articles because
Mm.
um, it was too much to talk about. And that's a reflection of this growth in journalism that we saw. And that is, in fact, one of our trends. But the other big trend is that so many things were trending that also engendered the journalistic surge. So if I had to do a highlight reel on 2023, um, it will surprise no one if you follow me that the trends that felt important weren't necessarily all the ones that were reported on, but we'll talk a bit about both. I think the big story of 2023 was phonics patching. In a
Mm.
in a development that's a complete blessing, and I don't say that lightly. Districts are attending to the issues with foundational skills that are the main focus of national reporting in 2023, as it was the most uh, pregnant topic in 2020, 21, and 22. So the good news is districts are getting that memo, but the dominant behavior seems to be districts investing in foundational skills improvements, but not necessarily the rest.
Right.
And
Right.
I talk about that as phonics patching because I think it's the best shorthand. I will take any gain in any arena. So this one, I don't want to say this disparagingly, but I want to say it honestly, that I feel like we're tackling 1 or maybe 1.5 parts of the problem in most districts. Um, we have a hard time knowing what the second biggest trend is. In fact, I'm on a lot of calls where we debate this. In ways that we'll talk about later, there aren't a lot of good sources for information about K-12 curriculum usage trends. So when we talk about whether the next biggest trend is a shift toward basal readers, or is it actually a shift towards knowledge building curricula? That's an open question that I've been asking a number of different research organizations and even nudging journalists to try to get into from an investigative journalism perspective. We know the following three things to be true. There is a decrease in usage of, or a decreasing market share for the, balanced literacy stalwarts. We know there are districts moving away from Reading Workshop and F&P. We don't know what volumes they're moving away in, but we know that there's a decrease. What we don't know, again, besides the magnitude of the decrease, is where are they going? We do know that basal readers are enjoying a surge. We've seen a number of adoptions of programs from major publishers, from the Interreadings to the Benchmark Advances and so forth. And we've seen increasing market share for the curricula that we describe as knowledge building: core knowledge, wit and wisdom, EL education, ARC core, bookworms. But no one knows which of those two is the bigger trend. And in fact, there are indicators that suggest mixed things about which is the bigger trend. So I also think one of the big questions about 2023 and 2024 is some of that, what's really happening in the details. And if you know a good research institution, push them to answer the question. Go ahead.
Compare basal to anthology. That was a good question.
I apologize that I'm not watching the chat. I'm watching my slides.
No, hey, it's why they pay me the big bucks.
You know what's funny? One of my favorite conversations today was someone nudging me about the need to redefine basals, because we talked about basal readers as if they were highly similar to anthologies. And there's a heavy overlap. Traditionally, we talked about basal readers as the thing used in K-5. So basals were shorthand for K-5. Anthologies were shorthand for the textbook-like thing that was a curation of texts and passages to be used in middle and upper grades. That's the traditional definition. But when we talk about basals in 2023, a lot of these new programs are even heavily ed tech influenced. And so, this generation is not your mom's basal reader. Right. And I'm not even sure that basal reader is the right descriptor for the later generation of what's coming out of publishers. Right. But in general, it's a set of programs that is not necessarily the most rigorous thing. At this point, in response to market developments, we can talk about this a bit more. Most of the current generation of basals is something that didn't do well in ed reports a couple years ago. So publishers stuffed more stuff into it. And now it's just an overstuffed burrito that's a mix of nutritious stuff and non-nutritious stuff. And no teacher could finish it in a year. So, you just hope that the bites that come out in classrooms are nutritious. Terrible metaphor, but I ran with it. So
it worked.
So basal's generally,
now I'm hungry, but it did work.
Particularly as what the traditional publishers are bringing to market are decidedly growing in market share. I think we need to get much more precise about what those programs look like, their distinctive characteristics, and what do we know about their growth. And by the way, this is a great way of previewing what I think will be the big trend of 2024. So stay till the end. Otherwise, I'm going to just run through the rest of this because we have lots to talk about, and we totally want to save time for discussion with a crowd that is so many thoughtful people that I'd rather be stopping talking now and asking you all your opinions, but I did promise to share some things. We saw a lot of big research in 2023. The two big research categories that I think were worth paying attention to, we saw a number of different studies showing us that if you designed curricula to build children's knowledge, proactively building foundational knowledge in sciences and history, that did in fact drive comprehension gains. Jimmy Kim, the Grismer study out of Colorado, these were two of multiple studies that came out in 2023 showing that. Unfortunately, we weren't seeing a lot of people drawing a through line through those studies, but that is in fact now a compelling body of research, and I hope that gets more conversation in 2024. The other big finding of 2023 research was out of the Shanker Institute report, which was super important. It showed that 45 states have put legislation in place to advance the science of reading costs since 2019. That legislation generally ignores knowledge building, but also curriculum is seldom a centerpiece in that legislation. So we're in this funny space where everyone believes that curriculum really mattered to bring bad practices into classrooms, but no states or few states seem to be making curriculum the centerpiece in advancing the change. So a trend to watch. And journalists keep focusing on curriculum. Mostly we hear about the ones that are bad.
True.
Sold a Story and a superb series in the Boston Globe by Mandy McLaren that I hope you're watching. Again, less focus on the positive side of that story and the more positive developments, and increasing angst in the literacy community about all of these trends, and some of the unspoken concerns in the space about kind of are we and are the institutions that are really centering curriculum kind of putting a fine point on these developments. So I will hush up now before I move on to the next question, but and I talk too fast, so forgive me for that.
Let me just see if there's any. Shannon's running from her Basil. So as far as the curriculum that's out there now, my concern, and it's sort of a joke that I make a lot, is I plan on getting rich because I'm going to make a roll of gold stars stickers that say science of reading, and I'm going to slap it on everything, and I'm going to move forward. And the concern now is that not the concern, but there is a lot of curriculum out there, but who's reviewing it to make sure that it is actually aligned with the research and that it's not just the latest catchphrase?
That's such a good joke. And what I love about your gold star joke is that, for more than a decade, we've been talking about this problem, but we had different language for it about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we talked about how everyone was slapping Common Core aligned
right
on the front of their textbooks, but what was in between the covers was anything but. So this instinct, this rebranding, I'm going to take a sidebar because it's my favorite thing to talk about, and I want you all to keep me honest. I'm going to write a piece about this in the next month if it kills me. Abby Boroff, tweet me every day if I haven't published it by the end of February.
By the way, now that you mentioned her name, I feel like we're friends.
I know Abby Boroff. Abby Boroff is just the person on whose face I see who will most keep me honest. But
I was stuffing my face earlier. That's why my camera wasn't on. So now I'm done.
You must keep me honest
She's my
on this.
friend on Twitter, and I refuse to call it X. So Twitter, everybody, if you say X, I won't respond. But go ahead.
So y'all are friends in this space, and we've been following these developments. A few years back, many of you may remember that Student Achievement Partners put out this excellent review of Teachers College Reading Workshop Units of Study that really spawned the conversations about the flaws with that program. And within a year, EdReports had put out its review. And of course, Emily Hanford's work had talked about issues with that program before that review came out, but Sold a Story really put a fine point on many of the findings in the foundational skills arena. So in the drim and dram of that, Lucy Calkins often put out responses in different ways, and sometimes it was about phonicators and sometimes it was about this and that. So in the same 2 or 3 month span, the SAP review comes out. Lucy Calkins and team put out a 6 or 7 page response to the Teachers College Reading Workshop review that said 2 important things that no one focused on. One of the things that Calkins and team acknowledged was actually that Reading Workshop didn't necessarily have the volume of grade level texts that were specified by the standards, and they probably should work on that. Got exactly 0 attention other than like me and one other person tweeting about it, which is why I have to bring this back. But the other thing that was acknowledged in the review was that actually Reading Workshop they weren't even designing for knowledge building, because that was the work of the content areas. And I mean, to her credit, Calkins had been hosting Reading Workshop, convenings, and the Teachers College institutes gave really wonderful voice to the role of content areas instruction and the importance of it. And the role of content knowledge wasn't lost on Calkins. She just didn't think it was her bag to focus on that. She expected heavy doses of content area instruction to carry the water for knowledge building for children. And so that was kind of her defense in this piece. And I thought, that's all of that is surprisingly humble and admissions that we all should be paying attention to. And within 2 months, I just happened on the Heinemann website and noticed the marketing copy that they had to describe the units of study product, and actively builds content knowledge, like knowledge building.
Oh yeah.
And, grade level texts. Both of those phrases were in the marketing copy in these like header displays that rotated as a carousel. And as a former K-12 marketer in my time, I think I just like snort laughed while looking at it, and wrote an eye roll Twitter thread, and then moved on. So we're probably all overdue to come back to some of those dichotomies between the way these products are talked about and how they're marketed. But I'll come right back off my tangent at this point to talk about who's reviewing curriculum, because that story, and thank you to Linda for pulling the SAP review up, is a wonderful segue to how most of what I just talked about is completely lost in the review landscape of 2023. And it's something that we really need to change in 2024. Take my breath and find my slides.
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 Slides are our friends.
Slides are my friend, because otherwise I would just take tangents all day. Tell you stories of 2020 things that I meant to write about then, and maybe I'll get to this year.
And I apologize. I sort of jumped in a little more quickly tonight than I tend to, but to everyone that's here, again, this is I'm looking at it, this group of people, and how lucky we are to have these people. So please feel free to, turn on your cameras if you're not laying in bed. I mean, even if you are laying in bed, we've all seen it, right? And just, jump in whenever. This is really meant to be an organic, intelligent conversation. So there's no parameters. So whenever you feel like speaking, right, Karen? Am I speaking for both of us? Do you feel that way?
100%. And there are more intelligent people out in that audience than myself. So I can't wait for the part where we all talk amongst ourselves in a bit. But I think one of the things, when I alluded to in the 2023 trends, how I see increasing angst in the space, in the literacy community, the biggest form of angst that I see is at the heart of this slide. We have an increasingly complex review landscape. We are in a space where most districts have normed around the idea that EdReports is the gold standard. And EdReports is the best known entity that is doing curriculum reviews, reviewing against the standards in a set of review instruments that have changed a bit over time. But there has been growing concern that EdReports, and it's not new growing concern, this is a sort of couple-of-year-old story that really has come to a head in 2023. There's a fairly growing awareness that EdReports has done a very nice job at this point of helping to raise the importance of separating the good from the bad in curriculum, and actually defining a review landscape. And EdReports did, in fact, by giving fairly pointed negative reviews to a lot of the basal readers of the first post-Common Core generation, and inspiring those publishers to go back and make material changes to those programs. EdReports did, in fact, help raise the bar for curriculum for United States districts. There's no question that the current generation of wonders is better than the last generation of wonders. Unfortunately, EdReports has not necessarily kept up with some of the developments in the landscape, and there have been some quality control issues with their reviews. So lately, I hear as many questions about the accuracy of their reviews as I hear endorsements of the accuracy of their reviews. And I think we have to start to call a spade, that EdReports is directionally accurate, but it can no longer be the standard bearer for what good looks like in curriculum. And honestly, anyone who's talking honestly about the space will say that. Usually they'll say it behind the scenes, and a couple of us are bold enough to say it out loud. So EdReports is kind of a lesser standard bearer at this point, and we have to figure out, what do we do in the wake of that development? So there are a number of state reviews, but most of the states that have gone ahead and created a review program did so in partner with EdReports, and more or less adopted the EdReports approach to reviewing, which is around standards alignment. So EdReports state reviews tend to be EdReports Light, or EdReports, by another different team of educators. I'm taking for granted that most of you know the EdReports process is to have educators, a trained set of educators, do the curriculum reviews. It's honestly one of the flaws in their process, because over time, their training standards seem to have slipped, and the reviews that you get in any given cycle are as good as the review team and the training. And in a lightweight training and a highly variable set of reviewers, it's part of why we see quality control issues with EdReports reviews. But in any case, state reviews have gone through, kind of similar approaches to reviewing curricula. So we've got lots of state review approaches, but I'm not so sure that they're producing different outcomes than EdReports by and large. The best known of kind of the next generation of review instruments is the Reading League tool. So the Reading League has had a review tool out. They've had a couple of generations of it. It has improved over time, like many of these instruments, but the Reading League review tool is strong on foundational skills. I'm not sure there's anything stronger, or there may be stronger things, but this one has great traction, and for foundational skills, I would endorse it myself. But the biggest concern about that tool is that it tends to focus super heavily on foundational skills, and other aspects of curricula tend not to get their day in the sun in that tool. And the newest tool on the list that I would want to have on folks' radar screens is that the Knowledge Matters campaign has put out a review tool that is a very strong distillation of what the must-wins are from the knowledge building perspective. And since it's impossible to disentangle knowledge building from work with grade level texts, from having writing that's connected to reading instruction, because that too is part of the helping it stick from a knowledge perspective, you'll find that tool to be the most sort of nuanced, I find, when it comes to all of the drivers of reading comprehension. But that tool only focuses on the drivers of reading comprehension and not on foundational skills. So
Right.
I really don't have any one place that I would point people to say, this is the tool. And I honestly see more tools by the day. So I feel like the space is actually increasingly complex and increasingly confusing for educators. One of the sort of reality checks about where we are at the moment.
I hope I'm not derailing the direction that you are right now, but one of the things that you and I talked about, and as you know, one of the hats that I wear is the moderator of the big Facebook page, and the number of which curriculum, my school is looking at this, my school is looking at that curriculum. It's at a point where, like, I'm having trouble doing my actual job because this question comes up so often. So the timing of this conversation is just so incredibly poignant and important. And it's, we talked about this a little bit before we went live, and it's a great problem to have, because last year it was all about the buy-in and are we moving in this direction? And now we're moving so quickly that, we're in the lane, but we need the right vehicles. So, with all this curriculum coming up in all the different states, like, is there anyone tracking it across the United States or?
You know, I'm going to move in a second to a couple of gory slides that I probably won't even really get through about who's tracking what's used in the United States. And the long story short is you really have to piece a lot together to get any sense. And I don't think anyone who's publicly publishing anything has a really clear sense of where these things are trending for reasons we'll get into in a second. But, you know, to speak authentically about where we are in this moment, I spent a lot of 2023 feeling guilty because I talk a lot about curriculum, and I again have the privilege of knowing, having been in classrooms using a variety of these programs, and so I have all this insider knowledge, and I couldn't even begin to answer all the questions that hit my DMs and come to me on my website. It's just there's been a deluge of interest, and I don't think there have been good enough scalable ways to answer people's questions about the curriculum landscape. So this too is a catalyst in some of the 2024 work that we'll talk about in a second. But I have exactly the same observation that if I look at the Science of Reading Facebook group, which is this important nexus of discourse about the space, I see all these posts that look like someone saying, you know, someone tell me about fill in blank, and fill in blank might be a program that I esteem highly, and fill in blank might be a program that I think has some question marks, but, you know, or a bit of both. My district is piloting X and Y. What do you know about them? And then I look at the responses, and often the responses, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, because I'm going to raise my hand and say, I don't have time to give substantive answers to all the, I don't most of the time. So I'm part of the problem. But then I look at the responses, and the responses are often, oh, that we use this and it's the worst, period. Or we use this and it's the worst. The writing isn't as good as what I've used before. Or, you know, and it's like this really simple answer that gives you a kernel of knowledge, but you don't begin to really have the kind of context to know, okay, well, what is the writing instruction like, and how substantive is it? How much is there? And that's a function of no one, myself included, I raised my hand at the top of the problem list, having the time and also the collected assets to go back and give a quick substantive answer. But the challenge that we all have collectively in 2024 is to figure out, how do we package what we know about these programs in a way that we can efficiently answer these questions, because we're underserving everyone in the space, and these daily, sometimes hourly questions, if we don't get there and get there fast. So
Right. And again, as a moderator on the page, you're much more mature than I am, because typically the answer is sucks. Okay, you know, it didn't actually move us forward in any direction, but I also appreciate the fact that, you know, these are hardworking people out there doing their best with something that, you know, hasn't, you know, filled the need that they need for their students. But yeah, I think there has to be, I think the time is now that there's more of a resource, so that when the question is asked, there's more of a resource to answer the question, as opposed to personal insights.
Over in the chat, Abby is keeping all of us honest with the most frequent exchange in the Science of Reading Facebook group of 2021, 22, 23. Which curriculum would you recommend? And usually when I use the word curriculum, I usually mean full course curriculum.
Yeah.
By default, that's my reflexive way of talking about curriculum. And if it isn't full course curriculum, it's a supplement. That's my vocabulary for this. So if I hear curriculum and someone doesn't say foundational skills curriculum, I assume they mean for all the things. But which curriculum would you recommend, followed by Heggerty, which is a segment of a segment as a program? That has been the default exchange in the Science of Reading Facebook group. And it has been, I think that in this week, when we're seeing the latest study and not the first study, but from the Florida Center of Reading Research, to note that districts using Heggerty versus districts using, unfortunately, the study didn't say exactly what else was used in the school in that district, but I think we can infer from A, FCRR studying it, and B, just the way that the context of the study generally, I'm inferring that there was a foundational skills program in the other schools. They weren't doing nothing. So the idea that we have the latest study of multiple showing us that Heggerty doesn't have, adding Heggerty on top of a foundational skills program that incorporates phonemic awareness, but as part of daily systematic phonics lessons, that isn't actually driving outcomes, is something for us to reflect upon. And one of the questions that came earlier in the chat, and I'll try to address this better later in the conversation, but one of the questions was, well, what are the reasons that one would say that the Reading League tool doesn't honor anything outside of foundational skills? Well, I think we all need to take a moment to realize that many of the loudest voices in the conversation, and I've name checked the Reading League, but they're not the only ones. They're far from the only entity in the space that has really centered foundational skills and spent most of the mind share in this conversation focusing on the speech to print, print to speech, phonemic awareness versus advanced phonemic awareness versus, I mean, the degree of focus on the nuances of foundational skills instruction, to a degree that probably led everyone to believe that that's where it's at, and contributed to the reasons that we see everyone right up to Mark Seidenberg going out of their way to ask whether all of that has gone a bit overboard.
Yeah, Lynn Stone too. Lynn Stone had a piece on it.
We could have an entire Zoom chat just about that dosage conversation. That is all worthy of a moment of reflection. So sure. When I introduce this as a conversation about curriculum, I don't just mean foundational skills, and I mean all of it. And we really can't totally take the tangent on all of that. But I think for everyone to take a moment and realize that it's not just journalists, it's also many of the leading voices in our space that have focused so heavily in one part of the instructional, on one part of the ELA block, that they probably led a lot of districts to believe that that was the part of the ELA block. And much of the experimentation and adding of supplements has been in that part of the ELA block, which probably has, in districts that leaned in that direction, expanded beyond its share of the ELA block. That dosage conversation is a lot of where we have to be in 2024.
Yeah, and Lynn, I your point so resonates with me. Karen, she's, Lynn just said that we are in a profession where we have to get it right. Actually, I'm not going to paraphrase because it was written really beautifully. We serve in a profession that wants to get it right, and it's too muddy to be black and white, hence the overcorrection.
People talk about these things as pendulum swings because there are often overcorrections. And I'm not, I could have an entire Zoom chat about things I got wrong in K-12 education. I did a stint in a literacy program, working for a literacy program that was in the ed tech space that today, because kids were reading on digital devices, based on what I've learned from work of so many important leaders in this space, I would no longer begin to recommend that product that I worked for 8 years ago, right? Nobody has gotten it all right, and I'm the lead learner on this call. But I'd like to see a lot more straight talk about the things we recommended a couple years ago that now we don't, or what does it look like to kind of right the balance, right? I think the right sizing of foundational skills instruction, the right sizing of many of these aspects of literacy instruction, the right sizing of skills and strategy, the best dosage for knowledge. This is where the heart of the conversation, if we're really going to get it right. And we need to embrace that not as a, not just as a like who got it wrong, but just as a, okay, I got it wrong at one point. So what's my best understanding today? and how do we keep pushing each other toward our best understanding tomorrow. I think that's the essence of where we need to be moving forward. But that's going to require a lot of organizations, including states, to say the best understanding of curriculum reviews in 2017 was EdReports. I personally like tweeted and name checked EdReports like every other day, because that was the important advancing of change back then.
Right.
And now I'm telling you they're directionally accurate and no better. That's my own version of, let me tell you the straight talk about how these things evolve, because they're going to keep evolving and we've got to stay current.
So is it okay if I ask you now what you see the road ahead for 2024?
Yes, I'm going to, quickly the honor idea that the executive summary because I promised to answer this question, who's actually tracking curriculum usage? The short answer is no one is tracking it well. The organization that is best funded to track it is RAND, but RAND is funded by the same people who fund EdReports, and their definition of high quality is what EdReports calls high quality. So if too many curricula have been given all greens and high quality reviews by EdReports, RAND is only as good as the instrument that lies beneath it. So the only organization that has consistent funding to do yearly dipsticks into what's used is using an unfortunately flawed metric. Beyond that, no one is tracking what's used in schools in a sort of steady and consistent way. There are 4 states, and I'm going to shout them out because, my God, we need to ask every state to do exactly what these 4 states are doing. So remember how to screen share. I can still do this, you guys. There are 4 states that are publishing what curricula are used in their schools. They've done so at different moments in time. So none of these are perfect instruments or show us perfect senses of change. But Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Rhode Island, and Nebraska have all been publishing information on what curricula are used in their schools. And if you do one thing, besides ask your state leaders for whatever else you think is missing, please ask your state leaders to publish this information, because these resources are godsends. And frankly, the Massachusetts Tracker is the heart of why we're getting amazing coverage out of the Boston Globe, because that reporter has a data source. So this is one development that I keep hoping that at the end of 2 years, there are 48 states on this list. But back to what do I see in 2024? I see a lot of things. I expect to see continued journalism. I expect to see continued discussion about dosage. I expect to see continued discussion about the right sizing of what should be happening in the literacy block, and how we make sure that we aren't overcorrecting in any particular directions. I love what Linda's mentioning. She can never find the curriculum listed on school and district websites. If I could change one thing and wave a magic wand, I would have a requirement that all districts have to publish the curriculum used, and also the 5-year reading and math score trends on their homepages. That would change K-12 education, but that's probably less likely than the other policy changes I suggested before. So pick your poison when you write your state leaders. But I do want to take a moment before I hush up and ask the brilliant people on this call to please chime in the things I've missed, to give you all a sneak preview, I'm going to call it, of some work that a few of you on this call are a part of. I've had a bee in my bonnet about all these developing trends, and the fact that too few people are willing or able or have the capacity or time or energy to go solve these problems. And the number one conversation I keep having is, why is no one in particular explaining the flaws with many of these still popular programs balanced literacy programs that go beyond foundational skills, a la the story that we discussed earlier about Reading Workshop and its marketing team. And also, why is no one addressing the fact that EdReports has become a diminished source of reviews when everyone knows that all green on EdReports doesn't mean what it used to? And in fact, some of the best curricula in the country don't have all green on EdReports. Why isn't anyone screaming from the void about that clearly and transparently? That problem has kept me up at night for all of 2023. And the best of you on this call and some who are not on this call have helped push problem solving into 2024. So in the next few months, what you'll see is the launch of a project that has the affectionate name, the Curriculum Insight Project, an effort between communities of educators who are coming together, who use some of the programs that are all green on EdReports, but shouldn't be, and at least one program that is not all green on EdReports and should be, to collaboratively publish, not reviews, because review implies some sort of highly rigid and almost dense output about a program, but to publish summaries of the look-fors about what we all need to know about those programs in really tangible and concise ways to help districts take action. And we're taking this project on with this particular adoption season in mind. So I think you'll be seeing a lot about this project in the next few months, because behind the scenes, a number of educators are busy, putting pen to paper and screen to screenshots about why we need to take seriously the concerns. We hear murmurings of concerns about interreading, and it's not up to snuff relative to other programs and some of the others, but it's time to actually distill why these programs, what the quality gaps are relative to what evidence-based practices look like. So watch this space. And in part, I'm grateful to Virginia for hosting this conversation, because we're just starting to talk about this project that a number of us have been working on for a while, but we're still recruiting more educators to this project because
Say the name again, Karen. One more, say that name again. The name of the
Curriculum Insight Project. We haven't even put out a press release. We haven't debuted a thing. We have our Twitter handle and not much more, but we have collaborative teams of educators who really want to distill clearly some of the gaps in quality for some of the programs that are already well known and hanging out in classrooms and getting phonics patch, like Reading Workshop and Fountas and Pinnell. We're going to talk about the gaps in areas beyond foundational skills so that it's clear to K-12 what those gaps are in other critical areas, like, are all children working with grade level texts, and what is the volume of work with quality texts in a given year. I could go on about what's happening in my own daughter's classrooms, where Reading Workshop involves surprisingly little reading of full texts in a given year. Another tangent I won't take right now, but give me time. And we're going to also put a spotlight on some of those programs that have these all greens and are marching into districts because they have big publishers behind them and big marketing teams behind them, but just don't begin to stand up to the quality levels of the highest quality programs in the space. So hopefully this effort will redefine what high quality curriculum is and bring tangibility to a conversation that needs it. But with that, I've talked way too long tonight, and I see all these brilliant faces on the screen. So I'm gonna hush up. And actually, I just hope we turn over to what other people have to say, because I'm talked enough.
Well, I think first I just have to acknowledge Linda's snapping and clapping. It's been a great night, but if I could just, the snapping and clapping has been fantastic. You have got to turn your microphone on first. You have so much to say. I'm dying.
I am so like this. I am so glad that I made time to join tonight, because this is like, I just like copied an entire paragraph from my latest thoughts on newsletters. this is where I am. And in addition to these review tools evolving, I think too, it's too easy to ignore that a curriculum that comes recommended for a particular district or school or area or region, may not also then be the best fit for their neighbor.
Right.
Because so much matters about the students we serve, the structures that are in place to support teachers with planning, the budget that the school district has to invest in the training that then gets teachers what they need to be able to implement well. And I feel like when you're missing those additional complexities and people aren't asking those questions as a part of their review process, you might adopt a curriculum that is fantastic on paper and then fails to implement the change that you're seeking. I'll stop there.
I'm going to take a half a second to respond to that because it's completely and utterly true. And yet, when I was at Open Up Resources, because the only time that I had a marketing job for one of the K-12 curriculum products, or a few that I'm really still proud to have, helped advance, by the way, your son's role, in the K-12 landscape, we talked at the time, and this was 5-6 years ago, about the need for a Surgeon General's warning on our products, that if you didn't get PD with it, you would fail. And I would say that about every single high quality program, period, end of story. So I agree with what you're saying, that there needs to be more attention given to the need for support for teachers. But the coda that I would add to that is, I'm not sure that we can say that for a few of the high quality options, but not others. They all need support. Some are more challenging to adopt than others. That is, I do think we need more transparency about the fact that some are a slightly heavier lift and some require more of a, we're going to talk more about bookworms in the next year, I'm sure, because that program has so much evidence behind it. But sometimes people talk about it like it's easy to implement. And I think in practical terms, Sharon's done a great job of making that a very usable curriculum for teachers if the school day is restructured. And we need to talk authentically about the fact that you actually have to restructure your school day to use bookworms. So straight talk about all of these programs, including the very best ones, and bookworms is on that list, is necessary. I'm going to be honest about the fact that this project is going to have straight talk about the lower quality ones first, because before we let them march into more classrooms, we should talk about, you talk about the issues with the weaker stuff before you talk about the reality checks about the best stuff. That's just good hygiene, my personal opinion. But yeah, in general, we need a lot more straight talk about how you find right fit across districts in a country that has, high fragmentation. And there are 14,000 plus school districts in America. We're kidding ourselves if we think that any one of the really awesome options, and there are a number of them at this point, is the right thing for all.
And the truth is, just practically speaking, weeding out the ineffective first is incredibly effective, because once a decision is made and once the money is paid, if it proves itself to be ineffective, it won't matter, because schools won't have the budgets to replace it. So the decision is just so incredibly important, because I've never seen anyone backpedal and say, oh, yeah, never should have made that decision. Let's pick a new curriculum next year. It's like, we'll look at this again in 10 years. So there's a generation of kids that will be getting an effective curriculum. So, you have to, I think it's imperative to just eliminate the least effective first, because we don't want them. Susan, if you're comfortable turning on your own microphone, that was a really great question, but I'm happy to read it for you. But if you want to jump in, please do.
Me?
Yes, you. Welcome.
How are you? I was sitting here reading everything. I'm like, oh my God, what did I ask? What was it about? And oh my gosh. with it is it, I hear about, discontent with ed reports and, what it doesn't do for us now, about the Reading League, tool, and it only really addressing the foundational skills and not the others, doing a good, job of that. And so those were things that I kind of wanted to bring to as a classroom teacher. And I happen to just be that nerd, who worked, I did curriculum specialist for SPED. So, I might have a little more knowledge than your average teacher, about how, you can go ahead and make, recommendations or decisions, or how to look through curriculum, because we're in South Carolina, we're at a real pivotal point. This year we adopt a new curriculum. And the state has done a year-long kind of work on what was going to be on the state list. So now we have 5 curriculum to select from. And you want to look at those, and you want to what things can you look at with this, and make the best possible decisions, because you're right, it's going to be a cost. We're going to have this curriculum for at least 5 years right now, with the fastest growing area, and I don't mean just simply growing bigger. I mean refining growing. I mean, we're in first, maybe second iterations of curriculum that are going to probably align better with evidence-based practices. And I think you're going to see lots of new additions happening and revised as they get in and pilot, and some is more solidified. So I really think that what's adoptable today is going to look different in 5 years because of that refinement. So, what do we use today? I have used ed reports. I don't tend to look at just what are their greens. Okay, yeah, I look at that. I like to look at what the reviewer comments had to say, like their explanations for why they rated. That kind of gives me lenses into what was seen or disparaged or was missing in that. I use the Reading League tool. It does have foundational skills, but it also does have language comprehension and reading comprehension and writing in it, and assessment as well. So, using that tool as well. The Knowledge Matters campaign came out with its own to look at just specific part of a curriculum. They're very clear about, look, we're not your everything. This is a niche part, but look at this to evaluate that curriculum. So it's kind of multiples that get kind of put together. It's kind of like, when we talk about identifying a problem, we say triangulate the data. Okay, well, let's triangulate from different sources of what is the best picture is like the only way I can think to do from this perspective.
You rightly summarize where things are. And I guess the sort of really hard reality of this moment, when I was alluding to the complexity of the review space, is that unfortunately there definitely isn't one review instrument that has spit out the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't even one review instrument that gives you the right inputs. It's a really complicated space right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to take away from the fact that the options today are better than they were 5 years ago. So
mm-hmm.
it isn't all bad, but for those of us who really want to push toward the very best thing right now, knowing that whatever is adopted this year isn't leaving classrooms for 5 years, or
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it isn't getting replaced by something better for 5 years. It might be in the back of classrooms in 1 year, but it isn't
Mhm.
getting replaced by something new for 5 years.
Right.
The urgency of that reality is very much felt by those of us who want to center discussions
Mhm.
of what good looks like this year and accelerate those discussions. If somebody doesn't call on Jan Hasbrook, I'm putting her on
You
the
took the
spot
word right
because
out of my mouth.
she is one of the most brilliant women in the
I was
country
just gonna
on
say,
the
I'd like to
call tonight.
exploit the fact that my microphone is on and ask you to turn your microphone on. I would hate for an opportunity to go by not to hear from you.
Yeah.
You're hearing from me. Hi. Hey, Karen.
Jan has an amazing new book that I can't wait to read in that I pre-ordered this afternoon. So Jan, thank you for your work, and I'd
Yeah.
love to know your thoughts on this topic or any other.
Well, you're all right. You are all correct in this conversation about the importance of curriculum, the value of the essential tool. I mean, the analogy that I always go back to when I think about curriculum for we teachers are the tools of a carpenter. You know, you've got to have a toolkit. There are other more probably finessed professional analogies we could use, but you've got to have tools. Showing up every day for a carpenter to build a house and have to invent his tools or go on Carpenters Pay Carpenters or
CPC.
it's just, yeah, right. It's ridiculous. It's patently ridiculous. And that how helpful it would be to have a really good, trustworthy tool that was comprehensive, that we all could trust and use. And it's complicated. This is really complicated stuff. There isn't going to ever be the perfect curriculum that you just buy it, take it out of its package, and use it with all children and have success. But we can get a core that does a better job and or the best job that we can do. You know, I was thinking tonight as some of these conversations were happening about that, hilarious, I mean, so true, all over the internet, teachers just desperately hearing about the science of reading, wanting to get connected with it and typing in what curriculum should I use. Or, you know, I'm using the XYZ program and what do you think? Oh, it's wonderful. It got all green on EdReports. I hate it. It's terrible. It's like, but I think some of that comes from the way a whole lot of teachers have been trained with very simplistic notion about what teaching is. You know, just love your kids, have a cozy corner, match them to their level, give them just right books, and teach them all these cutesy things like, you know, Skippy the Frog and all that, and you're done. And like, no, we want to take all that away from you and give you science and this incredibly complex stuff that includes words like dosage. I mean, dosage doesn't fit with cozy corners. But I'm glad to hear, Karen, that word is on your radar, because it's one that comes up in conversations among researchers all the time who are doing research like I do, and the translation of research into something meaningful for teachers. Dosage is part of what we have to do. Susan is asking a question about the book. I really appreciate that. The student focused coaching book, not student centered. That's a different model. And I can talk to you about that sometime. But student focused coaching is a book that has been out now for a while. Nancy Young and I, and if I stop talking, I'll put it in a link to it. Nancy Young and I edited a book. Has 20 chapters in it. It's a book about her infographic, climbing the ladder of reading and writing. And the book is called, there it is, thank you, Linda, Climbing the Ladder of Reading and Writing, 20 chapters written by some of the literally world's experts in different topics about the need that climbing the ladder to become a reader writer is a process. And all of our students are going to have different levels of ease climbing the ladder. Some are going to walk into kindergarten the first day and they've already climbed the ladder. And some of our children are going to climb it one rung at a time. And some children are going to climb and slip and all that kind of stuff. So the book is about how do we meet the needs in a real classroom for all of our students, including our advanced readers, our students with dyslexia, our students with developmental language disorders, our children with ADHD, our children who speak languages other than English. We have experts writing short, little accessible chapters on all of those things. That's it. I'm going back on mute.
No, never.
I'm prepared to stay here for 3 more hours just to hear Jan keep talking. Does anyone else raise your hand? They'll stay here till midnight. Thank you, Jan. There's so much more that we have to get right than the things we've been focused on. And that's the oversimplification of everything that everyone just said tonight. But yeah. Thank you, Jan. And what other questions or what other resources can we share? And thank you for everyone who's already stayed on longer than expected. I'm going to warn you all, I'm going to email you all to corral you into the efforts to help recruit folks to this fledgling effort to bring better transparency to the space, because I'm just going to presume from your presence at this hour that you're the true believers. But I did see a hand from Stephanie. So
yeah, so my question, thank you. I just happened upon this on Twitter today. I'm Twitter, it's not X, it's Twitter.
No, never X. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no more. And I just happened upon your post. I work for the Iowa Reading Research Center, and we are starting a big curriculum project. Number one, I would love to connect with you. But number two, so what do you recommend? What do we do when we're looking at curricula? Are we utilizing the Knowledge Matters tool, with the Reading Leagues tool, with the digging into ed reports? And then we're creating some things that we feel need to be in curriculum that aren't explicitly stated in either the Knowledge Matters or the Reading Leagues. Is that what what would you recommend?
you just summarized where everyone is who's thinking about this now, which is this moment of triangulation of a few of these tools are doing incredibly important work of distilling a part of the problem very well. No one tool has distilled everything perfectly. It sounds like I'm not the only one who's been working with some thoughtful educators in my midst to help distill what does good look like if you had to take it up a level and try to synthesize all those key things, including some key things that are maybe not named by those tools. I know I'll speak for, one should never say a statement like, I'll speak for Kareem Weaver, because if anyone speaks for himself better than anyone, it is the amazing Kareem. But after a lot of conversations with Kareem, there's one thing I know he would say if he was here, it is, does it work in the conversation? So there are these variables that are decidedly left out by those tools that need to be recentered in questions of how do we synthesize information about a program? And that's not the only thing that has been left out of our efforts to synthesize all of this information about programs and all of the key variables we should look at. So in the next few weeks, you will see the crack that our team at the Curriculum Insight Project has taken at trying to summarize the key look-fors about a program, from does it work to, does it have strong foundational skills, to, does it adequately do knowledge building, to the rest of the things we've put on our list. You can probably predict them. It's a late hour. I'm not going to itemize. You'll see our crack at it. I
Go
look
on, then.
forward, frankly, to seeing your crack at it. So yes, we should connect afterwards, and I would love to hear what your list looks like. But I do think 2024 will be this moment of trying to, for those of us who are trying to push this conversation forward, in the most practical ways, it is about how do we honor the fact that there is in the average school a 2.5 at best to 2 hours at most literacy block in the average school. And a lot of important things that schools need to get right. And we can't abandon teachers by acting like it's every teacher's or every district's job to figure that out. We need thought leaders in our space to better articulate what the must-wins look like. And we definitely need to better distill which curricula achieve those must-wins inside of that 2 to 2.5 hour block and which ones don't. And that illumination will hopefully keep pushing the conversation.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts from anyone? Last questions? Dad jokes? Please, no bad dad jokes. Please. Please, I'm begging you. Karen, you are just one of the most intelligent people that I know. Every time I talk to you, I leave smarter. So thank you. And I am personally very much looking forward to this, and I'm waiting for Linda's snaps, and I didn't get them. So I'm going to say that again. Thank you very much. Okay. I got the snap. And thank you everyone here, particularly Dr. Hasberg, for shining your light on us as well. Truly lucky and blessed and smarter. So can't wait to see what's next. And thank you very much, everybody. Go to bed. You all look sleepy. No, you don't. You look great.
Thank you, guys.